It's a year on from your first white paper, budgeting for a new normal, and you're updating it. So could you tell us to what extent 2010's good performance for the chemical industry has been based on fundamental recovery and demand?
Thank you, Will. I think the response to the white paper has been absolutely amazing. We've had over 10,000 copies downloaded all around the world, and so it seemed a good idea to update it a year on. The idea being that last year, in 2010, I was arguing that we weren't going to have a sharp recovery back to the world that we've had before. And I think it's turned out that way. We've had an excellent year in terms of profit, but in terms of operating rate, global capacity utilisation rates are still at only 85% compared to above 92% in the boom. So I think although we're much better than 2009, 2010 wasn't a full recovery, and I doubt that we're going to see much more improvement in 2011.
Well, in your new white paper, you're putting forward some scenarios. Can you describe them? And I'll put you on the spot and ask you which do you think is most likely to happen, to take place.
Oh, right. I think the first thing I'd say is that we're confronting the most uncertainty that I've ever seen in my last 30 years in the industry. There's a lot happening in China, and we really don't know what government policy is going to be about there. Are they going to pull back on inflation or keep the boom going? And that has been the mainstay of chemical demand for almost everything over the past 18 months. Enormous uncertainty there. In the States, we've now got a Republican-controlled Congress battling with a Democrat in the White House. What's going to happen there? Plus, in Europe, here, we're looking at governments moving very much towards austerity rather than the stimulus programs. So, how is this all going to play out? In the white paper, what I argue is it's the prudent thing for companies to do is to have a base case, an upside case if things get better. What would you do if the supply constraints continue? What would you do if demand did improve? And also a downside case. What would you do if it turns out that a lot of the demand we've seen has been built on a bit of air and has got into inventory, and in fact, when we come through in 3 or 6 months' time, we'll find that demand is actually a bit lower than we would expect. If you ask me, honestly, I would plan for the downside, and if it's better, that's great. But I think we've had 18 months during the worst recession for 50 years where we've turned in record profits. To me, that seems a bit unlikely, and I worry about what might happen next.
And in a bit more detail, can you tell us how companies can plan for this uncertainty? What kind of strategies can they adopt?
The very important thing is joined up thinking. Get the management team together and ask them to think about the really difficult questions. Not the things that you think about as CEO and they all say, oh yes, that's a great idea, boss. No, ask them to really reveal what are their concerns. Probably put some of your concerns on the table. The only way that you get through uncertain times like this is by pooling knowledge. We all know that teams have a better record than individuals, even the brightest of individuals, even the best informed. And so I think you get your team together and say, look guys, what can go better for us this year? What could go worse? And have real alternatives, not just a little bit better or a little bit worse. Supposing the States or China slammed on the brakes. Supposing governments in Europe actually reversed track and went for stimulus again. How would we react? How would we do better than competition? Those, I think, are the kind of key questions, the difficult questions, but the ones that I'm absolutely certain in 6 months' time will prove to have been very well worthwhile thinking about in advance.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Will.